True crime often brings us face to face with the darkest and most twisted aspects of human nature. Some cases leave a lasting impact, leaving both investigators and the public horrified by the depths of depravity that can exist in the world. One such case that shocked the police and the world was that of Thomas Campbell, a man whose chilling crimes and horrifying actions sent shockwaves through the community and beyond. Today, we delve into the terrifying story of Thomas Campbell, a case that continues to haunt everyone involved. From the brutal acts he committed to the twisted motivations behind his actions, Campbell's case remains one of the most disturbing stories of modern criminal history. Who was Thomas Campbell? Before the horrific crimes that would later make him infamous, Thomas Campbell was just an ordinary man. Born and raised in a small town, Campbell seemed unremarkable at first glance. He grew up in a relatively quiet and unassuming family, with no indication of the darkness that would eventually emerge in his life. Campbell was described by those who knew him as a quiet and reserved individual, someone who kept to himself and didn't attract much attention. He wasn't known to have a violent history or any criminal background before his shocking acts of violence. In fact, there were no red flags suggesting that he would become a criminal, which made the events that unfolded even more disturbing for those who had known him. Campbell was in his early 30s when his life took a deadly turn. He had settled into a routine, working a regular job and leading what appeared to be a normal life. But beneath the surface, there were signs of mental instability that would later manifest in terrifying ways. The crime, a horrifying discovery. The series of events that would later define Thomas Campbell as one of the most feared criminals in the region began on a seemingly normal day. It was on April 15, 2014, when the police were first alerted to something out of the ordinary. A 911 call came in from a local resident who reported hearing strange noises coming from the house next door. When the authorities arrived at the scene, they found something that would forever change their view of Thomas Campbell. In the home, they discovered the lifeless bodies of two victims, both brutally murdered in a fashion that would horrify even the most experienced investigators. The crime scene was unlike anything the officers had ever encountered before. It was a violent, bloody scene, with evidence of an intense and savage struggle. The victims, a young couple in their 20s, had been violently attacked. They had been stabbed repeatedly, their bodies left in a state of sheer terror and chaos. At first, there were no immediate suspects, but as the investigation unfolded, it became clear that Thomas Campbell was deeply involved in the crime. His connection to the victims was revealed, and soon, a chilling tale began to emerge, one that would leave the police and the public horrified. The motive. What drove Thomas Campbell? As investigators pieced together the details of the crime, they began to uncover Thomas Campbell's twisted motives. It became apparent that the brutal murders were not a random act of violence, but a carefully planned and calculated attack. But what could possibly drive someone like Campbell, who seemed to lead an ordinary life, to commit such horrific acts? The key to understanding Campbell's motive lay in his relationship with the victims. The young couple, who had been living next door to Campbell for several months, had grown close to him. They had offered him their friendship and even invited him to their home on occasion. However, behind this facade of camaraderie, Campbell had developed a disturbing obsession with the woman in the relationship. According to investigators, Campbell had become infatuated with the victim, developing an unhealthy fixation on her. He had begun to stalk her, following her movements, and even attempting to gain her attention in increasingly unsettling ways. However, the woman was unaware of Campbell's growing obsession with her. As time went on, Campbell's feelings toward the woman intensified, and when it became clear that she was not interested in him, his obsession turned violent. In a twisted act of rage, Campbell decided to take matters into his own hands. His jealousy and unrequited love for the woman drove him to murder the couple, thinking that if he couldn't have her, no one else could. The investigation, a twist of fate. As the investigation into the murders continued, the police began to uncover more about Thomas Campbell's life. They found that he had been living a double life, a man who appeared normal on the outside but was concealing a dark and dangerous side. Campbell's criminal history was minimal, and there was little to suggest that he was capable of committing such brutal acts. However, as detectives delved deeper into his personal history, they discovered a disturbing pattern of obsession and unhealthy relationships. In fact, there had been previous incidents of Campbell becoming fixated on other individuals, though they had never escalated to the point of violence. It was only when Campbell's obsession with the young woman in the couple became public that authorities realized just how deep his instability ran. Investigators learned that Campbell had previously tried to enter the couple's home on multiple occasions, but they had always managed to shut him out. But the real breakthrough came when police began to examine Campbell's computer and phone records. There, they found disturbing messages and photos that hinted at his growing obsession with the woman. They also found evidence that he had been planning the murders for weeks, carefully researching methods to kill the couple without getting caught. The arrest and the trial. Thomas Campbell was arrested shortly after the murders, and the evidence against him was overwhelming. During his interrogation, Campbell initially denied any involvement in the killings, but eventually, the weight of the evidence led him to confess. He told police that his obsession with the woman had driven him to a breaking point, and that he had snapped in a fit of rage when he realized she was never going to reciprocate his feelings. In his confession, Campbell detailed the brutal and calculated manner in which he had attacked the couple, recounting how he had used a knife to repeatedly stab both victims in a frenzy. The trial that followed was one of the most publicized and shocking events in the region. The prosecution laid out a detailed account of Campbell's actions, while his defense team argued that he was suffering from severe mental illness and should be given a lighter sentence. However, the jury found Campbell guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder. The courtroom was filled with emotions as the verdict was read, and Campbell's life was effectively over. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, and his name became synonymous with one of the most horrifying and senseless crimes in recent history. A community reeling from horror. In the months following the trial, the small community where the murders took place was left to grapple with the aftermath of such a devastating crime. Neighbors who had once known Thomas Campbell as a quiet, unassuming man were left in shock, unable to comprehend how someone they had lived alongside could commit such brutal acts. The case also had a profound effect on law enforcement officers involved in the investigation. The brutality of the crime, coupled with the chilling motives behind it, left many officers haunted by the events. Some of them later reported that the case was one of the most disturbing they had ever worked on, and the image of the crime scene remained burned in their minds for years. Lessons learned. The dangers of obsession. The case of Thomas Campbell serves as a stark reminder of the dangers of obsession and unchecked mental instability. While many people experience infatuation or unhealthy attachments, most are able to manage these feelings without resorting to violence. However, Campbell's case illustrates how untreated mental illness, coupled with a dangerous obsession, can lead to catastrophic consequences. It also highlights the importance of recognizing the warning signs of dangerous behavior, especially when it involves stalking or obsessive tendencies. Had there been earlier intervention, it's possible that the tragic deaths of the young couple could have been prevented. The case of Thomas Campbell shocked the world, horrified the police, and left a community reeling from the brutal murders that took place. It serves as a chilling reminder of how seemingly normal individuals can harbor dark and twisted desires, and how those desires can lead to unspeakable acts of violence. While Campbell's fate was sealed by his actions, the impact of his crime is still felt to this day. For those involved, it's a case that will never be forgotten. And for the public, it serves as a haunting reminder of the darkness that can sometimes lurk behind closed doors. Thank you for watching this deep dive into the disturbing case of Thomas Campbell. If you found this story unsettling, please like, share, and subscribe to Dark Diaries for more true crime cases that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Stay tuned and stay safe.